Hi, it is the Wedding Wednesday report. Welcome for another week. My name's Christine and these reports are brought to you by the Australian Academy of Wedding and Event Planning. Last week we started chatting about weddings in unusual spaces. I'm actually really enjoying this topic because it focuses in on planning. So yes, we are looking at the design of a wedding in an unusual space, but really every wedding comes together because of how well it is planned. And our topic today centers in on a really basic consideration, and that is time. How much time are you going to allow yourself to plan and design this wedding in an unusual space? This is actually a really significant point to consider. One of the best pieces of advice that I have ever read about planning a wedding in an unusual space comes from Sasha Souza of Sasha Souza Events. Now, Sasha is the queen of weddings in unusual spaces. She does amazing work in really unusual settings, a lot of times in wine country, so vineyards, that sort of thing. But she is a master at bringing together a wedding in an unusual space and making sure that it works. And we talked about it working last week. The flow is really important. But her piece of advice around planning and designing a wedding in an unusual space is about the time you allow yourself. And she said that you are always going to need more time than you would normally if you could just walk into a venue that is purpose built for weddings and events. And she also made the point that you can't let the client dictate to you what time you are going to need to execute their design. So once you have worked out the design concept with the client and you've built all of that and they've signed off on it, if they then balk at the idea of the amount of time you're proposing to execute that design, it's not you who needs to cut down, it's possibly them. Because of the challenges involved in weddings in unusual spaces, your time is going to be so important to making sure it works. The exception to this rule that I'm telling you about in terms of time and making sure that you set the time you need is a wedding in a public space. Now, you still need to work out the time you're going to need, but you may not actually be able to utilize all of that time because you just can't get access to that public space. I did a wedding a few years ago in a rotunda in a very big park in Brisbane, and we actually couldn't access the rotunda until an hour before the wedding. The design was very simple, but there were decorations to go into the rotunda, and whilst I had assessed that it would need a certain amount of time to do that, I actually didn't have that time available to me. So what I had to do was hire additional staff to help me. So that is where you need to, again, look at time and then what you're actually going to need to make that come together if you don't have that amount of time available to you. A lot of couples like to have a wedding in their favourite restaurant. That's become quite popular these days. But again, this is where you need to consider that you're planning a wedding in an unusual space and with a vendor that may not be used to doing weddings. So they may still open for the lunch trade because your wedding's not till 4 p.m. So again, that issue of time comes into it. You may need 6 hours to decorate the venue for the wedding, but you may actually only have about 3. So whilst a lot of couples may think that a wedding in an unusual space is going to save them money, if they do have an intricate design or want a lot of decorating done, then their costs could be doubled or tripled just by the labour involved to make it all happen in the time available. When planning a wedding in an unusual space, As we said last week, it is very important to go through all of the challenges that are going to be involved and work out how you're going to counteract them. And then, as with any wedding really, consider the amount of time that is going to go into counteracting those challenges, and also what staff you're going to need to help you make it happen in the actual time that you have available. So I've said the word time endlessly throughout this report, but as I said at the start, that's really what it was about. A wedding in an unusual space will undoubtedly eat up more time and possibly a lot more of your resources to execute. So when a couple comes to you with that really exciting idea about having a wedding in a paddock miles from nowhere, you are going to have to talk to them about the logistics of that and the time that it's going to use up for everyone involved, from you as the planner, through to the caterer, through to the musician, and even the guests travelling there. I hope you've enjoyed this week's topic and it's given you something to consider. I know a lot of you love the idea of styling weddings in unusual spaces. So if you do have some thoughts about the challenges involved and how you might overcome them, I'd love for you to leave some feedback with today's video. And of course, as usual, please subscribe whilst you're here so you don't miss an episode of the Wedding Wednesday Report. We'll see you next week. Okay. Are we filming?
Yeah.
I'm on the ball.